Maria Avdeeva is a security expert, disinformation analyst, and global communicator. She is a strategic communications and security expert with expertise in consulting and research, specializing in countering disinformation. After the full-scale invasion, she shifted her focus to documenting Russian war crimes, delivering reports to broad international audiences, and collaborating with leading global media organizations. Some of these include CNN, BBC, NPR, CBC, and others with whom she has shared her security-related insights. Welcome to Silicon Curtain. Please like, subscribe, and make sure you share the channel to get the message out about why it's so important to support Ukraine. Also check out the validated Ukrainian charities that appear in the description of the video. I'm delighted to welcome Maria. I've watched her reporting really since the start of the full-scale war. It's incredibly insightful and detailed. Of course, she's a brilliant communicator, and I'm glad to be able to have this conversation on the channel. Maria, welcome.
Thank you very much for such a beautiful invitation, and I'm happy that we managed to make it. I hope our power situation will allow, because there are huge power disruption across the country, and normally we don't have power for 6 hours in a row, and this period has just started. So I'm now using all kinds of devices that allow me to be online, but generally there is no power in the house and in this neighborhood where I live.
You know, this is going to become an ever more important aspect of the war. Now, last winter was relatively stable, and a lot of planning was done, a lot of resilience was built into the system, and I think Russia was potentially running short on missiles, and air defense was pretty robust. But this winter threatens to be far, far more difficult. Russia has made it a strategic objective to degrade Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Well, we'll come on to Russia because Ukraine is doing something similar to Russia's energy infrastructure. But what do you think are the implications? And is the right kind of preparation being made for what could be a very difficult winter ahead?
Yeah, that's a very difficult situation with power, and it's going to be even harder. And many people right now currently are preparing for the winter, making their plans. And some of these plans for some people are to leave Ukraine, unfortunately, because just to describe very quickly the situation in the big cities at the moment, and then I'll talk about what Russia has done to do it. So as I say, that's like 6 hours no power, then power is back for 3 hours, and then 6 hours again and nothing. And this means that if you live on the upper floor, you don't have elevator, you don't have water because pumps are not working, you can't prepare your food, you don't have internet if you have not prepared yourself properly for this. So for many people this is a real struggle, and we are in a summer months when you have like natural light outside most of the day, but people are thinking what will happen when autumn and winter comes, and when it will be much darker and colder, and the days will be shorter, and then the online education will not be possible for children because there will be no internet, and many other things which mount up on top of each other, and which makes people really nervous about what will happen next. And I think this was Russia's plan. Actually, because yes, we were preparing for winter to be hard, but actually what Russia is doing now, they are gradually taking out Ukrainian energy system one by one, destroying power stations and supply lines. And almost every attack, every Russian missile, like major missile attack, leads to destruction of one or another chains in the Ukrainian power system, and this takes time. So they started doing this in early spring, and now we are almost at the end of summer, meaning that they used this 6 months to make Ukrainian energy system to weaken it as much as possible, and they continue. In terms of what are they using, they try to take out this energy infrastructure objects in large missile attacks, and they're becoming more creative because as we have seen in the recent attacks, the missiles are maneuvering across Ukraine. So it's not just straight from one point in Russia to the target in Ukraine, but the missiles, they go all around. They use combinations of different missiles, Shahid drones, to overcome and bypass Ukrainian the air defense systems and try to reach the targets and to get out another infrastructural objects in Ukraine. And for frontline cities like Kharkiv, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Mykolaiv, it's even more difficult because Russia can reach them with more easily and with, for example, S-300 missiles, and they have lots of them, and they can basically try to destroy even more than has already been destroyed. But for Kharkiv, for example, the situation is already critical because 3 of the major power plants were destroyed, so there is nothing left. The possible decision could be is when Ukraine will start to this, they call it the distribution system. So they will put a lot of smaller power producing objects in the cities, which will be much difficult for Russia to take out because there will be a lot of them and they will be much smaller. But the key thing is timing, because Ukraine does not have time and the time is running out very quickly, and I'm not sure how prepared we will be when colder months come.
So the question I was going to ask is, what is Russia's strategic purpose in this? Or could there be multiple purposes? I mean, clearly they want to overrun the whole country, but that is probably no longer possible. Putin probably understands that's no longer possible. So there could be multiple objectives here. One is to force Ukraine to some kind of unjust peace. Another motive could be to depopulate Kharkiv, to make large parts of Ukraine uninhabitable. What's your theory on what Russia is trying to achieve through these terroristic attacks?
Yes, absolutely, Jonathan. The purposes, the aims that you have mentioned are there, and Russia has multiple in mind. Also, apart from that, they know that people are suffering and they want to try to break the will of Ukrainians. So in their miscalculated thinking, and I say miscalculated because we have already seen that what Russia's plans are and what they have in theory very rarely works in practical life. So in their thinking, they probably think that if we will destroy Ukrainian energy infrastructure and make Ukrainians suffer, they will start asking their government for peace negotiations because people are tired, exhausted, and they want to have electricity back, and this will push them for the negotiations or whatever, which is a miscalculation because the mood is completely different. So they actually achieve the complete different thinking among people in Ukraine. This is one thing. The other thing is they know there will be again, people live in country, especially people with children or people who need special care, who depend on electricity. For them, it's sometimes it's impossible to live under these conditions. So depopulating areas is also the reason. And then crushing Ukrainian economy, because most of the big enterprises and production sites, they depend on power. Without this, they won't be able to produce what is needed, which is also one of the Russian goals, to make like Ukraine as a country not possible to exist. This is what actually they say loudly, that Medvedev, when he says that we are ready for the war to last for 10 more years, because afterwards there will be no Ukraine, and this is what they aim to completely destroy the whole country, to make it in their imagination to again the territories that then Russians will come to and try to grab.
And we can see that as well in the kind of attacks, very intentional attacks, I think, on objects like the Children's Hospital, one of the largest in Europe, of which contained many children recovering from cancer and various other conditions. Those images, for a brief moment, did make it onto the front pages of many of the world's newspapers. In fact, I checked, almost all the UK newspapers had those images on the front page. But days later, it recedes in people's memories. The Trump assassination, etc. The rolling cycle of news means that unless you're really engaged with Ukraine as a topic, it can slip out of your consciousness. And yet this is the largest scale war, and the war with the greatest implications for world security since the Second World War. From Ukrainians' perspective, does the West look weak, and does the Western public's attention, is that a real problem for strategic thinking?
Well, for Ukrainians, it's not that the West looks weak, but many people in Ukraine think that the response is not enough. Like, people always wait when something like this happens, when Russia destroys children's hospital or commits any other horrendous war crime, that there will be a very tough response. But on the other hand, we hear more and more concerns and talking, but not real action. For example, here, as you know, and Ukraine is asking for permissions to use longer range missiles to strike deeper into Russia, which will allow to destroy Russian planes before they take off and before they launch the deadly missiles that then go to Ukrainian cities. Actually, Ukraine is doing it now by what the means we have, and these are drones. So yesterday, Morozovsk airfield in Rostov region of Russia was again very heavily hit, and this will for some time stop Russians from using this airfield to attack Ukraine, which makes generally the situation more secure for Ukrainian cities. So Ukrainians are waiting for this kind of response for Russia's actions, so that we will have a stronger support, not in words, but in real life, deeds, so that permissions will be made, more air defense will come, this kind of things, because Putin and Russia, they don't understand talking. If someone talks, then they think that this is just the weakness, then can exploit.
This is the big debate, isn't it, about how this ends, because there are more and more signals that Russia itself is brittle, its economy is suffering. When the US tightens pressure, even a small amount, on secondary sanctions, it does seem to have a significant effect on the Russian economy and, by extension, the war economy. Do you think ultimately, if the West wants Ukraine to win, then it's going to need to apply significantly more pressure to the Russian economy, stop the sanctions breaking, stop the grey fleet? In essence, crashing the Russian economy is going to be a more effective way to end the war and force a Russian retreat than potentially conventional battlefield methods.
Well, I think that we just cannot rely on one thing here, because we need to combine these things and others as well, like pressure on Russia on every kind of front and in every situation, because of the scale of this war. One thing is just not enough. The economic sanctions are very important and they are painful for Russia, and the West has to continue and make them more tough, but this will not be enough to stop the war, because Russia is finding ways of how to get these spare parts. If we look at, for example, Russian drones disassembled here in Ukraine, then you will see that most of the parts used in the drones are Western made. And the same for other things. They find the ways of how to smuggle them into the country, and also they buy missiles from their friends and dear partners, they have already used North Korean missiles to attack Kharkiv and other locations. So we need both weaponry and sanctions, and also pressure on diplomatic fronts, because this only when Russia's leadership see that there is no way how they can weaken the position of the West, then they will understand that this is serious. Because I think for now, still Russia is thinking that, okay, West is weak, we will use this time, they will forget about what has happened, and in some time, everyone will get back to business as usual with us. So if they realize that this is not going to be the case, and then everything will be very strong, then they will rethink their approach, and then this will actually lead for Russia and for Putin to make a decision to stop the war.
And the last 2 years must have proven to Ukrainians that whereas there are allies and they have provided a lot, ultimately Ukraine cannot entirely depend on allies for everything. And that includes long-range strike capability, which you've mentioned. How important is it that Ukraine has been able to create some self-sufficiency in, say, the large-scale production of drones, but also combine this extraordinary tech innovation with civic society that provides this bridge or connector to the front lines? And you've written about this very eloquently and in a lot of detail. This extraordinary kind of feedback mechanism that's been created of testing and learning extremely rapidly at the front line, and then feeding it back to tech entrepreneurs. Is this system working well? Does it need more scale to become more effective? And how important is it that this kind of production is not totally dependent on Western allies?
Yeah, this is just an incredible working network, and I've just recently worked on a documentary with one of the German media about this, on how tech and technology changes the war in Ukraine. And this is incredible to see. Actually, we followed the startup that was crowdfunding money from Western private donations, then bringing this money to the producers of drones, and then taking the ready to use drones and bringing them to the front lines, where then soldiers use them either to hit the targets or for reconnaissance or for other means. And this is just one simple story, but there are lots of that in Ukraine. This is the whole network which is functioning like incredibly, extraordinary good. What it lacks funding, but then a lot of funding is coming privately from people around the world who donate specifically for this, for the production of these drones, which are later used on the battlefields. They are different, which is, the drones, which is sometimes like an obstacle, because then the drone operator has to know all kinds of drones and how they are used. But of course, it will be easier for them, for the soldiers, if it will be like very unified weapons, which everyone knows how to operate. But soldiers tell me that this is normally takes them several days to start to get to know how to operate a new drone. So it is like an obstacle, but it's not something huge. So it is still can work in that way, so that different drones are used. Sometimes it even better, because now we see the competition between Russia and Ukraine in production of drones, and also in usage of jamming systems. So everyone tries to produce a drone that will be invisible for the jamming system, and then will be able to act in the Russian occupied territory or in Russian territory without being noticed and put down. So these small productions of drones all over Ukraine, they allow to come up with some very innovative ideas and types of drones, which are then tested and used. But of course, to use them on a mass scale, there has to be like a massive production, which has to be supported and is supported by the government. And most of the money for this will have to come from the Western aid, because Ukraine is just not having enough. And this is where we connect with the previous question, why Russia is trying to take out energy and economy, because this will not allow Ukraine to have money to put into the production of means that like enable Ukrainians to defend the country, and also the production of new drones.
And there was an extraordinary story I was reading, I think it was in the Kiev Independent, and it was essentially saying that parts of the Ukrainian military-industrial complex actually have more capacity to produce things like artillery units, like the Bogdana artillery piece, that actually the production could be 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times more if the material and money was available to allow that to happen. Of course, the Ukrainian central government has a lot of call on its budget, and there's a lot of constraints there. This could be one way in which Western partners could bypass, I would say, the very slow restarting of their own production lines by helping to support the Ukrainian industry reach its capacity potential.
Absolutely. What we see here during this war is, well, the whole reorganization of the processes from like mostly Soviet-styled type of army Ukraine had before the war, like let's say before 2014, then it was modernizing, but still it was like a very bulky and unflexible kind of army, to the completely new type of army, which is flexible, which reacts quickly, which can quickly implement best technological solutions and be very innovative. And unfortunately, this processes is happening during the war, which puts specific restrictions because of the lack of the personnel, because of the lack of money, of materials. So logistics are very difficult. Just to give you a quick like example, Russia, as I said, they are developing their drones as well, and they are developing their reconnaissance drones. So now Russian reconnaissance drones are already known that they can fly as far as, for example, Dnipro, which is quite far from the front lines, and meaning that they have a view on what is happening around the city. So this puts a very special restrictions on the logistics, on where the production can happen, and you know, this is all like adds on the difficulties to production of new weapons. But of course, you are completely right. This is the way of how West can also help Ukraine. And I think I see very positive signs here that we are moving in these directions. I think that most of this is we keep to try very low secret, so that Russians will not know what is happening, where are the locations, but I am very positive about the dynamics here.
And the last question, I think, and this is a fairly broad one, it seems that with some people, with some Western leaders, the idea has not sunk in yet that Putin will not stop until he's stopped, that whatever peace negotiation takes place, it may well just be a technique to allow him to string the West on, as has happened numerous times, or to have a pause in hostilities to allow his army to refresh, rearm, and reorganize. This idea that Putin's aggression is going to be relentless, not just against Ukraine, but against Western interests, that does not seem to have sunk in with a lot of people. And yet every Ukrainian I speak to instinctively understands that. How do we communicate this across and get Western leaders to really understand that Putin has to be stopped?
Yeah, I think this is one of the major tasks for us, for Ukrainians, for people like you who support Ukraine, to get this message through. And actually, well, everything what I write, I try through this to get this message through, because I think that this is the key thing. Before this is becomes like the common knowledge, the common thread, then we are not going to see any major change. And this is so incredibly, like, I can't understand why this is happening. It's like people compare very fairly Putin to Hitler. And if it's the same, if we will imagine in, I don't know, 1940, starting talking to Hitler, hoping that probably now he will realize that he is on the wrong path, and then we will try to negotiate with him. This is a completely like wrong logic. And for everything Russia and Putin do, and if we look at what's happening, they are going on the way to mount their aggression, to become more and more expansionist, and they are openly threatening other countries. So they are not going backwards. They are, like, on the contrary, all the time are progressive in their aggressive posture. So to get this message through, I think it's just through the means of communications. I don't think there is any other way of how to tell it people, just by showing what's happening on the ground, to opening up Russian plans, to show how Russian disinformation works. And this is not, disinformation is not about telling the lies. Disinformation is for Russia is preparing ground for later offensive actions on the ground. This is how they work, and this is why it's hybrid aggression, because they combine both. They combine actions in the information sphere with action that they then do physically. And this is like happening everywhere in Europe. We see these assassinations, we see people killed, we see explosions on the military plants, and like, I think this is really has to be the core for in communication, and for people to realize and see it as a, like, as a Russian plot, as a Russian scheme that they are actually already implementing. And we are in Ukraine so worried because we have seen it happening. If you look at what was happening since 2014 to the moment Russia invaded, they were preparing ground for this invasion. Right, it took them 8 years, right? But still, all this time they were putting resources in preparing their war machine. What would make people think that they will not start the same kind of preparations, or not preparing now for the later attacks on the European countries?
And of course, meddling in political affairs in Europe, the US, and others, are also to create a political environment where we are weakened and fail to organize and fight back against Russian aggression. So it's not just physical aggression; it's a multi-front aggression. And I think, you know, hopefully we'll have another conversation and we can dive into the topics of information warfare in more detail. And I think it's more critical as we approach the November election in the US. But for now, Maria, I strongly advise people to check out your work. If they don't already know it, many of course will who watch this channel, but I'm hugely grateful for you for coming on the channel and giving such sort of clear and strong answers to my questions.
Thank you very much for having me, Jonathan, and good luck with your channel. I hope more people will subscribe and help share the word, because by sharing this information and by uncovering what is happening, we help not only Ukraine, but I hope we help the democracy and countries of the free world.